So the question is always asked, do the Packers commit to going all in? Do they commit as an organization to playing for the future, to winning now? Do they push all their chips to the middle when ultimately they have the opportunity to field not only a good team, but a team that potentially could win the Super Bowl? And I think the trade deadline exemplified this to a lot of fans who would say the answer is no, would say that that was always the deficiency with Ted Thompson. He was focused on draft and develop, draft and develop, draft and develop. And when he needed to make the big move, he never made it. He never acquired, insert name, right? Marshawn Lynch is always the example. Could have got him for this pick. They didn't do it. And I think the thing people have to look at, if they really want to be honest with themselves, is while it would be great to commit and go all in any scenario when your team is 6-2 like the Packers are, and a player like Will Fuller or a player like Delvin Tomlinson might put you over the top. And who cares about the draft picks? Because you might miss on one of those guys anyways, right? The challenge with that is that all considerations are made for the organization based on truly the fact that, yes, they want to win right now. And yes, they want to put as much talent around Aaron Rodgers as possible, especially because of Jordan Love. If the clock has started on the Aaron Rodgers era being over, then ultimately putting more talent around him right now would obviously be the focus of the organization, right? Unless they're absolutely backwards and maybe pushing Rodgers out sooner than we think, right? I don't think that's the reality. I think the reality of the situation is Jordan Love was the best player on their board. When they traded up and couldn't get Ayuk, and the top receivers were gone, while I might have taken Patrick Queen or Kenneth Murray, they said, listen, quarterback in the first round is on a 4-year contract with a 5th-year option. Aaron Rodgers only has 4 years left in his contract. With the increase in his salary cap dollars, with the increase in his age, we're going to have to think about a transition plan for him. On top of that, Tim Boyle is a restricted free agent, and he's an undrafted player. So to tender him an offer, they're going to have to overpay for him as a backup with no real line of sight to say he's an actual player that can be worth the 2.8, 2.1, whatever the range is for his tender offer to be a backup, and for sure, probably not the future replacement for Aaron Rodgers. They made that decision. Now, is that a condemnation of them playing for the future? No, but there are salary cap considerations. There are reasons, right, that ultimately they chose Christian Kirksey over Blake Martinez. They chose Rick Wagner over Brian Bulaga because there are salary cap considerations, and not just for this year, but for the future. And that's what I think fans have to pay the most attention to. Again, would I like them to push all the chips into the middle? Yeah, I mean, there's times when, we celebrate as Wisconsin fans when Doug Melvin says, I'm going to trade 4 prospects, actually 4 really high-level prospects to get Zach Greinke. But they didn't win the World Series. So there's always going to be that balance of, now people in retrospect might criticize Doug Melvin to say, well, that's look what you gave up. I mean, you built a World Series team for the Royals. But at the time, you were happy that they had built, and now was the time to get your Eugene Robinson, to get your Keith Jackson, to get those guys that Ron Wolf got to put the Packers over the top. And while I don't think the Packers do everything in their power to win the Super Bowl every single year based on how I would do it, right? They also are, the third winningest team in the last 20 years, right? And again, you can point to the quarterback play, but I would challenge you to say, well, that was drafting a quarterback before your Hall of Fame quarterback was ready to retire. That was committing to playing him maybe sooner than you wanted to. And in the first year of Rodgers starting at quarterback, they drafted a quarterback in the 2nd round and in the 7th round, right? So continuing to draft, develop, continuing to position your roster to be filled with talent that can make your roster more competitive, can make your meeting rooms more competitive. That to me is doing everything in your power to win the Super Bowl. And when we look at the receiver position, a lot of people will say, well, the receiver position could be better. Absolutely, the receiver position could be better. But based on where they are in the salary cap, who could they have signed that they could put on their roster now? And who would you be willing to sacrifice to make that happen? Right? In retrospect, we could have saved the money on Rick Wagner, right? Because we could play Lucas Patrick at right guard. We could play Lindsley at center. We got Elton Jenkins. We got Bakhtiari, and we can draft, Runyon and all those type of guys. Oh, man, we wasted that money on Rick Wagner. But when we signed Rick Wagner, gave us a veteran guy to, again, hedge your bets in case, a young player wasn't ready. Now, what if hypothetically at 24, right, one of the tackles that was a high-ranking tackle in the draft fell backwards? Or what if they traded up for one of those guys? Again, Rick Wagner was that hedge your bet veteran guy to give you security, but it wouldn't have opposed them from drafting a young tackle high in the draft, right? I think the same thing at wide receiver. They weren't opposed to drafting a receiver high in the draft, whether they signed Devin Funchess or whether they believed in Allen Lazard or they wanted to see more from MVS and EQ. And guys, that to me is competing to win a Super Bowl, filling your roster, making your roster as talented as possible so that ultimately, you put yourself in a position to get into the playoffs and compete. Now, where are they deficient talent-wise? I think there are areas. I think they are rolling the dice on the players they have on their team at the defensive line, at linebacker, and at wide receiver, that the talent in those three rooms is not at the level that the quarterback room talent is, that the running back room talent is, that the secondaries level of talent is at, right? The O-line's talent level, right? They've committed a ton of resources to those rooms. The outside linebacker room, ton of resources to that room. And the talent level in those rooms is as high as it's ever been, right? But you're going to have positions that, yeah, you need MVS to truly, when we think about it, guys, to be the third wide receiver and be a vertical threat. Yes, I need him to catch some crossing routes when he's wide open. Okay, but we really need him to be a guy to take the top off the defense and be the third wide receiver when Allen Lazard is healthy, right? Now, again, you could say, well, Allen Lazard's not a number two receiver. I would agree with you. But in this offense, and with the way he's played and the way he's developed since he's been a Packer and how they use him, I would argue, is he not playing at the level of a number two receiver when he's been healthy? Obviously, he's been injured the last couple of weeks. Right? He's been a great compliment and a guy that Rodgers trusts. So you could go out and trade for Will Fuller, but you got 8 games of a guy that's going to eat up a ton of cap space in 2020 that potentially affects you signing guys in 2021. He's a free agent in 2021. And you got 8 weeks to try to build rapport and trust with Aaron Rodgers. Now, yes, is he an upgrade over MVS on paper? Of course he is. Of course he is. But I don't want Will Fuller if it takes away my opportunity to re-sign Aaron Jones or David Bakhtiari. And that's what a GM has to balance, is that balance between what's on your roster. And if you look at their roster, they have 2 elite players that are potentially all pros that are free agents in Bakhtiari and Lindsley, right? And I would argue Jones is as close. So, guys, the Packers 100% are trying to win a Super Bowl each and every year, especially with Aaron Rodgers. And regardless of if they take Jordan Love as the heir apparent and the future quarterback of the Packers and a guy that's not going to play this year and impact your roster this year, and you could use that first round pick on something else, that doesn't mean that they don't want to win a Super Bowl. Now, again, are they using all their resources to win a Super Bowl? That's a different argument. And using a first round pick on a guy that's going to sit on the bench all year is not using all your resources to win a Super Bowl. And you can argue philosophically with that, but you can't argue that they're not a winning organization, that they don't have a winning formula. And you got to give them the benefit of the doubt because they've been right the majority of the time. The reality is the majority of the time they've been right. Now, philosophically, you could say all your draft capital should go towards The holes that you have on your roster making your team better. You should have been D-line, wide receiver, linebacker. D-line, wide receiver, linebacker. And you should have went after it. But they didn't. Because when you draft for those positions of need, they might not be a need when those players are actually ready to play.